a man stands on the bank of a river that is no longer a river. The papyrus reeds along the edge are stained dark crimson, designed to terrify a stubborn dictator into letting a slave workforce go. And it is a judgment. It is a liberation. So the plagues accelerate. Moses speaks. The fields grow quiet. A plague strikes the Egyptian livestock. The sacred bulls of Apis collapse in the pastures. The cows representing the mother goddess Hathor drop dead in the mud. The horses stagger. The camels fall. The Egyptian economy breaks in a single afternoon. But in Goshen, not one animal dies. Pharaoh sends men to check the Hebrew camps. They find the sheep grazing peacefully. The line in the dirt is holding. And yet, the golden crown does not bow. So Moses acts again. No warning, no speech. He walks to a furnace. He takes a handful of soot, the very ashes from the brick kilns where the slaves have bled and burned for generations. He throws it into the air. The ash drifts down. It touches the skin of the Egyptians. It erupts into festering, burning boils. The pain is blinding. The skin blisters and cracks. The magicians, who once tried to replicate the blood and the frogs, try to stand before Moses in the court, but they cannot. Their knees buckle. Their skin is covered in the same agony. They crawl away, utterly defeated by the dust of their own slave kilns. The gods of health and medicine, Isis and Imhotep, are completely silent. The ground is broken. The economy is dead. The bodies of the priests are covered in sores. But the Egyptian sky is still clear. But if you look closer at the cultural geography of the ancient Near East, at the specific targets the text highlights, until Moses lifts his staff toward the heavens. And the pattern finally reveals its ultimate target. A reader holding the scroll of Exodus in one hand has to hold the scroll of Genesis in the other. Because if you map the sequence of the plagues against the first chapter of the Bible, you begin to see a blueprint that is far more terrifying than a simple list of judgments. You are watching a cosmic rewind. In the opening lines of Genesis, the Spirit of God hovers over the dark, chaotic waters. He speaks, and boundaries form. He separates the waters above from the waters below. He commands the dry land to appear. He orders the creeping things to stay in their domain, the livestock to graze in the fields, and the sun to govern the sky. Creation, in the biblical imagination, is the act of establishing borders. To the Egyptian theologians in the palace, Ma'at was the invisible force that kept the cosmos from falling apart. But the Hebrew text argues that Yahweh's spoken word is the only gravity that holds reality together. When Pharaoh rejects that word, the gravity turns off. At the precise order of the chaos, you start to see something the magic trick reading completely misses. The plagues are not a random display of power. In Egypt, Yahweh takes those exact Genesis borders and systematically erases them. The frogs do not stay in the water. They cross the boundary into the clay baking ovens and the royal beds. The dust does not remain on the ground. It rises into the air and bites the skin. The boundary between the animal kingdom and the human domain collapses entirely, under the suffocating weight of the flies. The water turns into a sluggish river of death. The livestock drops dead in the pastures, and then the humans break out in festering, weeping sores. Their very skin, the final physical boundary of the human body, rupturing and breaking down. The plagues are not a random sequence of magical horrors. They are an intentional unmaking of the world. Yahweh is showing Pharaoh exactly what reality looks like when the Creator removes his sustaining hand. He is taking the Egyptian empire and returning it to Tohu Wabohu, the formless, void, and chaotic state of the universe, before God spoke light into the dark. If Pharaoh wants to claim the title of supreme deity, if he wants to bear the burden of holding the universe together without the God who actually made it, Yahweh gives him exactly what he asks for. They are a systematic decreation. Yahweh is not just fighting a mortal king who refuses to listen. He hands him a universe collapsing back into the abyss. And this explains the precise escalation of the disaster. Yahweh starts with the water, moves to the land, and then attacks the beasts and the bodies. He is working his way backward up the ladder of creation, undoing the days of Genesis, one by one. Everything God originally ordered into existence to sustain human life has been inverted into an instrument of death. The earth has been unmade. The waters are ruined. The dust is weaponized. But the ultimate authority in the Egyptian pantheon does not live in the mud. He rules from the sky. Moses stretches his hand toward the heavens. The sky tears open. It is not just rain. It is a terrifying, deafening roar of ice wrapped in fire. Thunder shakes the heavy stone pillars of the palace. Hail the size of rocks hammers the flax and barley into the mud. Lightning runs along the ground. A blinding web of electricity and flame. The goddess of the sky, Nut, has been shattered. The atmosphere itself is falling on their heads. Pharaoh panics. He confesses. He begs for the thunder to end. Moses prays, and the sky falls quiet. But the moment the clouds clear, the heavy heart returns. The lock snaps shut again. So the wind changes. An east wind blows through the night. He is going to war against the very architecture of reality that Egypt has constructed. He is pulling down the pillars of their universe. You can hear it coming before you see it, a dry, rattling hum echoing across the desert. The locusts descend, millions of them. They cover the face of the land until the earth is black. They eat every green leaf the hail left behind. They chew through the bark of the trees. The fields are stripped to bare dirt. The agricultural empire is erased. But there is one final pillar holding up the Egyptian mind. There is one ultimate deity who sails his burning barge across the sky every day, the father of Pharaoh himself, the unshakable source of all light and life, Ra. Moses does not warn the king. He does not ask for an audience. He simply reaches his hand toward the sun. The light dies. It is not an eclipse. It is not a dust storm. It is a thick, suffocating blackness. The Hebrew text says it is a darkness that can be felt. You cannot see the hand in front of your face. You cannot leave your bed. The air feels heavy, like a woolen blanket pressed against the mouth. For 3 days, the greatest empire on earth is paralyzed in absolute, terrifying night. Ra has been executed in the open sky. But in the territory of Goshen, in the small, mud brick houses of the Hebrew slaves, there is light. The lamps burn. The families breathe, one deity at a time, to expose the empty space behind them. Every plague is a targeted strike. The boundary holds. The darkness is not a meteorological event. It is the physical manifestation of Pharaoh's heavy heart. For 3 days, the king sits in his pitch-black throne room. He cannot see his own hands. He cannot see his servants. He cannot find the door. The cosmos he claimed to rule has been completely unmade. The gods are dead. The Nile is ruined. The sky is empty. The empire is a graveyard. And yet, he will not bend. He summons Moses one last time and threatens him with death. He chooses the dark. And the terrifying reality is that this choice did not end in the ancient sands of Egypt. We do not wear golden serpent crowns. But we are a species obsessed with our own Ma'at. We build our own personal empires of predictability. We do not call it cosmic order, we call it control. We construct a pantheon of modern deities to keep the chaos of the universe at bay. The god of the steady paycheck, the goddess of public reputation, the idol of biological health, and a meticulously curated calendar. We rely on these mechanisms to hold our world together. And when those gears stop turning, we react exactly like the king in the palace. Every miracle is a theological argument. He is not just freeing bodies from brickyards, he is breaking the spell of an empire. When the interruption comes, the sudden drop in the bank account, the cold silence of a doctor looking at a scan, and the public failure that shatters our image, it feels like the water has turned to blood. We feel the heavy, suffocating weight of a life that is no longer working the way it is supposed to. We stare at the cold, blue glow of a smartphone at 2 in the morning, to our hands, gripping the sheets, trying to figure out how to replicate the magic and get the order back. But there is a detail hiding in plain sight back in Exodus chapter 7, verse 5. Before the first drop of blood hits the Nile, God tells Moses exactly why he is about to tear the Egyptian reality apart. He says, "The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretch out my hand against Egypt." The word the English translators render as know is the Hebrew yada. It does not mean intellectual awareness. It is not the memorization of a theological fact. It is the word used for the most intimate, vulnerable experience a human being can have, that has convinced the world it controls the cosmos. And the terrifying part is how methodically he does it. It is the exact same word used in Genesis chapter 4 when the text says, Adam yada Eve, and she conceived a son. It means to know by experience, to know closely, to be completely exposed to reality. That root changes everything about what is happening in the plagues. Yahweh is not dismantling Egypt out of spite. He is stripping away the false layers of reality so they can finally see what is actually there. The decreation of a life is not an act of divine cruelty. It is an act of forced intimacy. God breaks the false gods of Egypt because they are standing in the way of Yada. They are preventing the creation from knowing its creator. Pharaoh refused to be known. He chose the heavy heart. He chose to sit in a pitch-black room rather than step off his throne and admit he was vulnerable. He would rather rule over a graveyard of frogs and flies than surrender to a god he could not control. We do the exact same thing. When our personal plagues hit, we lock our jaws. We tighten our grip on the steering wheel. We build the walls higher. But the story does not end in the dark. Because the final plague does not target a false god in the sky. It targets a piece of wood right in front of a house. There is a pattern hiding in plain sight beneath the blood and the boils. A deliberate, surgical sequence. The river turned to blood, and the source of Egyptian life was exposed as a graveyard. The goddess of fertility swarmed the bedrooms, and the blessing became a suffocating nightmare. The dust of the earth rose up to bite, and the ground itself rejected the empire's magic. A line was drawn in the dirt of Goshen, and the gods of Egypt could not cross into the slave camps. The sky shattered with ice and fire, and the atmosphere was handed back to the Creator. The supreme sun god went entirely black, and a dictator was left sitting alone in the dark. And a lamb's blood was painted on a wooden doorframe, and a nation of slaves walked out of the wasteland alive. Same pattern, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is that darkness in the palace, and the quiet light burning in the mud brick houses of Goshen. Not the light of a sun, because the sun was dead. The light of a God who had finally shown up to dismantle the machinery that kept his people in chains. The light that held the boundary when the rest of the world was falling apart. If you are in a season where everything you rely on is breaking down, where the predictable rhythms of your life have been shattered, and you feel like you are sitting in a darkness that can be felt, that answers the one question Pharaoh sneered at Moses back in chapter 5. Who is Yahweh? That I should obey his voice? Do not assume the story is over. Sometimes, the unraveling of your world is not an act of destruction. It is an act of yada. It is God removing the false gravity, stripping away the idols you thought were keeping you safe, so that you can finally know the one who actually holds your life together. If this opens something up for you, subscribe, leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels like their world is falling apart right now. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who is not afraid to break your phantoms, walk with you through the dark and bring you out, carrying a light no empire could ever extinguish. The smell of rotting fish rises in the morning heat, thick enough to coat the back of the throat. Pharaoh did not ask that question because he was an atheist. He asked it because he had a catalog of over 2,000 gods, and Yahweh was not on the list. He was the undocumented deity of a slave caste. By the time the final cry rises in the Egyptian night, that question will be answered. Not just for the king pacing his palace, but for the Hebrew slaves huddled behind blood-stained doors. But to see the blueprint of this war, to feel the weight of what actually happens in the text, you cannot start with Moses lifting his staff over the water. you have to start with the invisible concept that kept Pharaoh on his throne. The ancient Egyptian mind did not separate the spiritual from the physical. They lived in a universe governed by an invisible principle called Ma'at. You can translate Ma'at as order, truth, balance, or justice. But to the average Egyptian, it was the gravity that held the world together. It was the reason the sun rose blindingly bright over the eastern dunes every morning. For 3,000 years, the Empire of Egypt is built on one unshakable foundation: absolute, unbroken predictability. The sun rises with a violent, blinding heat every single morning. The water laps against the mud, but it does not sound like water. It moves slowly. It moves heavily. The Nile River floods exactly when it is supposed to, washing over the banks and leaving thick, black silt behind to grow the wheat that feeds the ancient world. The stars march across the night sky in perfect geometric lines. To the Egyptian mind, this predictability is not nature. This is Ma'at. Ma'at is the ancient Egyptian concept of cosmic order, harmony, and truth. It is the invisible fabric that holds the universe together and keeps the terrifying waters of chaos at bay. Ma'at is not just a philosophy. It is the physics of their reality. And the burden of maintaining this massive cosmic balance rests entirely on the shoulders of one man sitting on a throne. Pharaoh is not merely a politician. He is a linchpin. He is considered the living incarnation of the divine, tasked with upholding Ma'at through ritual, through power, and through the brutal subjugation of anything that threatens the order of the state. If the Nile provides the water, if the sun warms the earth, if the crops break through the soil, it is because Pharaoh has successfully pleased the gods and maintained the balance. For the Hebrew slaves, this order is a nightmare. For 400 years, they have lived under the crushing weight of Ma'at. To them, Egyptian order means the crack of a leather whip. It means the smell of sweat and endless mud bricks baking under an unforgiving sun. The gods of Egypt are not their protectors. They are their wardens. And the Pharaoh, wearing the golden serpent crown of a living god, stares at the Nile. A few feet away stands an 80-year-old shepherd holding a piece of dead wood. Egyptian pantheon functions exactly like a cosmic bureaucracy. Every god has a jurisdiction. Hapi controls the flooding of the river. Akhet, the frog-headed goddess, oversees childbirth and fertility. Geb is the god of the dust and the earth. Nut stretches her star-covered body across the sky to form the atmosphere. Ra, the supreme sun god, sails his burning barge across the heavens every day, fighting off the serpent of chaos in the underworld every night. They are the gears of a massive, predictable machine. So, when Moses walks into the throne room, covered in the dry dust of the Midianite desert, and announces that a god named Yahweh demands the release of the slave workforce, Pharaoh's response is completely logical for his worldview. He doesn't just refuse. He scoffs. To grant this request would be to admit that a foreign, unseen deity has authority within the borders of Egypt. It would be a catastrophic failure of Ma'at. It would mean Pharaoh is not in control of his own domain. And that is exactly what Yahweh intends to prove. He is not going to debate Pharaoh's theologians. He is going to systematically dismantle the bureaucracy of the Egyptian heavens. God be God, our priest, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. He starts at the very bottom, striking the one thing the entire empire depends on most. Aaron raises the wooden staff. He strikes the surface of the Nile. The water shudders. It thickens. And a nation built on absolute, unbroken order suddenly watches its lifeblood turn into a graveyard. This is the first plague. The great river, the lifeblood of the empire. The domain of the god Hapi turns into a sluggish, metallic-smelling artery of blood. The fish die. The river stinks. The air grows heavy with the scent of copper and decay. People dig desperately along the banks in the hot sand. just to find something to drink. The magicians of Egypt step forward. They whisper their incantations. They manage to replicate the trick on a smaller scale, turning a bowl of water into blood. Pharaoh turns his back. He walks into his palace. He ignores the stench. 7 days pass. Moses speaks again. Aaron stretches his hand over the waters. The river vomits frogs. They do not just stay on the banks. They swarm the streets. They cover the stone courtyards. They crawl into the clay baking ovens. They lie cold, wet, and pulsing against the skin of the royal family in their beds. The invasion is not a random ecological disaster. It is a divine mockery. The frog is the sacred symbol of Heket, the Egyptian goddess of fertility and childbirth. To kill a frog in Egypt is a punishable offense against the gods. So Yahweh multiplies their goddess until she becomes a suffocating nightmare. He gives them exactly what they worship, until they are begging him to take it away. It is the opening chord of a sequence that will shatter the greatest empire on earth. Frogs swarming the royal bedrooms. Pharaoh begs. Moses prays. The frogs die. The smell of rotting piles of frogs replaces the smell of the bloody river. But the moment the relief comes, Pharaoh changes his mind. He locks his jaw. The slaves will not go. So Moses speaks a third time. He does not even issue a warning. Aaron simply strikes the dust of the earth. The dirt beneath their feet, the domain of Geb. The god of the earth turns into swarms of gnats. They cover the donkeys. They cover the camels. They swarm the eyes and mouths of the priests. The dust bites. It crawls on the skin. The magicians step forward again. They speak their words. They wave their hands. Nothing happens. The dust remains gnats. The bites continue to sting. The magic has run out. The magicians look at Pharaoh. They tremble. This is the finger of God, they tell him. The bureaucracy of the Egyptian heavens is beginning to collapse. The water is poisoned. The fertility is rotting in piles. The earth itself is attacking them. But Pharaoh does not listen. He sits on his throne, scratching at his skin, watching his world unravel. He will not bend. And the reason he will not bend is the most misunderstood detail in the entire Exodus story. Because something is happening. Gnats rising in clouds from the desert dust. Hail falling from the sky wrapped in fire. Darkness so thick you can feel its weight on your skin, inside the chest of the king. Something the English translation flattens. But the original Hebrew reveals as a terrifying, surgical strike against the core of Egyptian theology itself. Over and over again, in the book of Exodus, the English translations tell us the exact same thing about the king's internal state. Moses asks for freedom. The plagues fall. The relief comes. And then we read that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. It sounds like an emotional stubbornness. We picture a tyrant digging his heels into the sand, crossing his arms, refusing to admit defeat. But if you are reading this in the original language, you see a masterclass in divine irony. The word the English translators render as hardened in Exodus chapter 7, verse 14, is the Hebrew kaved. It does not mean hard like a rock. The root meaning of kaved is heavy. It means dense, weighty, or burdensome. When the text says Pharaoh's heart was caved, it is not just describing his psychology. It is invoking the most terrifying imagery an Egyptian could possibly imagine. Every Egyptian knew exactly what happened when a king died. According to their sacred book of the dead, the deceased pharaoh would enter the underworld and stand before the jackal-headed god Anubis. There, in the Hall of Two Truths, the king's actual heart would be placed on one side of a massive golden scale. On the other side of the scale, Anubis would place a single ostrich feather. Most people read the story of the 10 plagues of Egypt and see a random assortment of divine magic tricks. This was the feather of Ma'at, the symbol of perfect cosmic balance. If the king had ruled justly, his heart would be as light as the feather, and he would pass into eternal life. But if his heart was heavy with injustice, heavy with cruelty, heavy with the blood of an oppressed people, the scale would tip downward. A heavy heart meant a guilty verdict. And waiting beneath the scales was a crocodilian beast ready to devour the heavy heart and erase the king from existence entirely. This route changes how you read every interaction in that throne room. When the Hebrew text tells us that Pharaoh made his own heart caved, the author is using Egypt's own theology against them. Yahweh is weighing the living God of Egypt on the scales of his own religion, right in the middle of his own palace, and publicly finding him guilty. The hardened heart is not a random psychological stubbornness. It is a theological death sentence. If seeing the ancient context behind these words is shifting how you read your Bible, you are exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we dig into the historical layers most readers miss. So the heavy-hearted king refuses to bend. The first 3 plagues dismantled the water and the dust, proving that the gods of the earth were powerless. They read it as a cosmic flexing of muscles, a sequence of escalating punishments, almost like a divine temper tantrum. But now, Yahweh shifts the battle lines. He does not just escalate the intensity of the plagues. He changes the geography. The morning air hums. It is not the faint, irritating buzz of the gnats. It is a roar. Black clouds of flies roll across the delta, thick enough to block the sun. They descend on the mud brick houses. They bite. They tear. They ruin the food, the clothes, the very walls of the Egyptian homes. But right at the edge of the capital, something impossible happens. A line is drawn in the dirt. On one side of the border, the Egyptian houses are suffocating under the swarms. On the other side, in a territory called Goshen, where the Hebrew slaves live, the air is perfectly clear. No flies, no buzzing, just absolute, terrifying silence. This is not a random miracle of protection. It is a declaration of territory. Yahweh is proving that he does not just possess a chaotic magic. He possesses absolute precision. He controls the borders. The gods of Egypt cannot even defend their own capital. And the God of the slaves is carving out a sanctuary right in Pharaoh's backyard. Pharaoh flinches. He offers a compromise. Worship here in the land, he says. Moses refuses. The flies leave. The heavy heart remains.